Hello, my name is Jonica Newby, and you may know me for the many years I was a science reporter on ABC Television's Catalyst program, but I'm also an author, and I'm excited to tell you about my new book, Beyond Climate Grief, A Journey of Love, Snow, Fire, and an Enchanted Beer Can, which is every bit as surprising and quirky and magical and beautiful at times, I hope, as it sounds. Now, the booksellers Harry Hartog have asked me to tell you about the book, and they've sent me a list of questions. So here goes. What is climate grief? Okay, climate grief, I think, is the point where the abstract intellectual of climate change suddenly gets personal and real. I guess this is the point where you realize that it is going to affect something that you love or someone you love, your kids. And it sort of gets you in your bones. It can be really emotional. It can be overwhelming, actually. Now, of course, not everyone feels grief exactly. Grief itself is a roller coaster of emotions, famously anger, denial, depression, but also joy and all sorts of other things. So all those different emotions are in the book. Don't worry, grief is only the first chapter. Next question. Can you pinpoint the moment when you realized you had it? Yes, I can. So I'm a science reporter who figured she knew a bit about climate change, but as I said, it turned out I only knew it intellectually. I need to explain to you my heart place. So there's a place I love as much as I love people, and that is the snow. Australia's beautiful, sparkling, magical, fantastical snow country. It's the place I've always gone to escape and be in a bit of a fantasy world, right? And so a few years ago, I was on a holiday in Japan, my first time there. I was all excited. I was hanging out with ski instructors. A ski instructor on holiday from Europe, what was he doing in Japan in January, his busiest time of year? So I asked him, Axel, and he said, there's no snow in Europe. And I was, what? Switzerland had had a green Christmas that year. And I was shocked. And a week later, the Great Barrier Reef, 50% of it died. And I'm a science reporter. I knew what that meant. I knew that 50% that was dead was not coming back. And as I looked around at all this beautiful snow around me, I suddenly was hit with this realization that that could be ahead for the snow country in Australia that I love. So I got back home and I couldn't concentrate on anything until I tracked that down. I actually spent a year researching what was going to happen to snow. And at some point during that year, these emotions just kept coming. You'll hear about it in the book, but it got pretty overwhelming. I didn't even have a word for it. And I realized later I could call it climate grief. Okay, that's the first story in the book. That's only the start point. Is this the book you expected to write? Well, no. So I had a great plan. I'd sort of got through my grief a bit, and I figured I would tell you the personal story, model it on Lee Sales' Any Ordinary Day, right? So I'd tell you about my own personal story, and then I'd use that as the launch pad to go and talk to a whole lot of other really great, interesting, inspiring people and get their advice and take and share that with you. And look, I still did that. I spoke with the beautiful songwriter, Missy Higgins, whose chapter is just stunning. I spoke with the comedians, Charlie Pickering and Craig Rucastle, great business leaders like Mike Cannon-Brookes, as well as a whole lot of psychological experts. But I started writing this in October 2019. And the world started changing around us so fast. I was in Sydney and the fires were just smoke everywhere. It was quite overwhelming. And so the book took on this incredible epic odyssey, memoir quality. I mean, there are times where we all felt like we'd fallen into an apocalyptic film. And so that sense of living in a film or a novel actually comes through in the book. And also I had to add all these other chapters because my own family were in Malakuta and were facing this monster out of, some odyssey, the fires. So it became a far more epic book than I expected, but I hope much more meaningful and important and useful to us all as a result. Okay, next one. What role does the enchanted beer can play in this story? I'm glad you asked. So it has many roles. So first of all, I want to talk about the magical in this book. I mean, it's a true story, but bear with me. So the word enchanted, the enchanted beer can, that sort of nails that. But also, look, when I was starting, okay, I'm a science person, but I also love Lord of the Rings and fantasy novels. They're part of what made me fall in love with snow, right? It's part of our imaginative world. And so when I was hit by the climate grief and trying to work my way through it, I suddenly felt this resonance with Lord of the Rings. I went, oh my goodness, we are actually living those times where something literally black, coal, is threatening something literally pure and white, snow. And this juxtaposition just kept with me as I was telling this story. Like I just mentioned, there were times during that summer of 2019, 2020, and then into the plague, where we did all feel like we were reading the novels that or living the novels that we read as a kid. And there's another resonance there. So I mentioned Lord of the Rings at the beginning of the book, but it becomes this sort of recurring theme because there are all these heroes that I meet. One of the people in the book tells me early on that to deal with climate grief, I have to start looking for heroes because they sustain you, they inspire you. And when I started looking, they were everywhere. People just started even looking like something out of a hero film or Lord of the Rings. You wait till you meet Postmistress Pam and Squiggy the Pig, or Nick, who did this incredible disaster film dash down a corridor of fire and then got to the steps and the steps were on fire and somehow survived all that. So this sense of the magic and wonder in the world comes through almost in a novelistic way in the book. The other thing about the enchanted beer can, sorry, that was a long answer, is that it's funny. So I always wanted to have a quirkiness in the book, and there is actually a chapter on humor and the importance of it, why we evolved it. Think about it. How many jokes were people making, even during the fires, especially during COVID, just to try and deal with everything? And there's a reason for that. And the Enchanted Beer Can story is actually one that came from a comedian, Charlie Pickering, and it's gorgeous, and I'm not going to spoil it and tell you what it is, so you'll just have to read the book. Okay, next thing. You spoke to a number of people in the course of this book. Was there a response that surprised you? It's true, I spoke to fantastic people, Missy Higgins, Charlie Pickering, I just mentioned a few. I suppose the only thing that really surprised me was how emotional everybody was as soon as you scratched the surface. I mean, I was interviewing Charlie, the comedian. I'm thinking he'll make me laugh. He starts crying. And this sort of thing happened again and again. And then the opposite also happened. People who'd been through the fires, who I thought would be all traumatized, and of course they were, but they made me laugh and laugh. And all these stories, I suppose the whole journey of the book was surprising. I suppose the whole depth of meaning that came through in it from things like the philosophy of active hope, which started to have such resonance during it. The fact that we all ended up looking for meaning. The fact that we were overwhelmed with compassion and gratitude and a desire to help. All these things were so much larger and more epic than I ever expected when I set out on this adventure. And this brings us to the final question. If there's one thing you learnt that made you hopeful, what is it? Yeah, I'd say all of the above. I think the events that we went through in 2019, 2020 felt epic because they were epic. We have hit some sort of transition point in the world. I think that we will look back on the events of 2020 as a turning point. And look, there's going to be a lot of turmoil and a lot of emotions around, and I hope this book helps us all prepare for that better. But I think we'll look back on it as a turning point where, first of all, we really, more and more of us got to feel climate reality personally and took it seriously, and things are starting to shift. And that is already happening. Even since I finished the first draft of the book, we've seen business leaders and some politicians really stepping up and taking a hero leadership role. I think the other thing that gives me so much hope is that I talked of heroes and how everyone came across as a hero in this journey and in this book. I think what happened was that we were all confronted with something so much bigger than us that it forced most of us to look at what means most to us in our lives, at what we value, at what gives us meaning. And what many of us found was that a lot of the crap we'd worried about wasn't so important. What mattered was our family, our loved ones, time, and helping others. There's research I came across for the final chapters of the book that show that when disasters happen or bad things happen, we become more compassionate and generous. And we saw that. We've seen that through 2019 and 2020. We can all vouch for that. Other little things, big things that give me hope, of course, the kids. That's one of the main chapters in this book, is the Castlemaine kids. Oh my goodness. They are so incredible, and they are showing us the way, and they are pulling us into our better future. There are so many great things that can and will happen over the next decade. And we're all going to be on this adventure to see it happen. So that's all the questions. And yes, this is my new book, Beyond Climate Grief. I hope you love it. It was an incredible journey to go through. And you can get it from your local Harry Hartog bookseller or online from them as well. So thank you all. And I may meet you down the track talking about the book. Take care. I hope that recorded.